Hi, this is David Thibodeau, and I love the Mike Hansen Archives.
You've seen it with your own eyes. Can you tell me what you've seen?
There was no child abuse at all. And when Joyce came in to check the children, I talked with her. And as I talked with her, she told me that our children was very intelligent, that she could find nothing wrong, no indication at all of child abuse. They answered every question, and she is very surprised that they were so polite. But
Okay. And I even seen something where the sheriff had said the same thing. Did you see anything like that?
well, I haven't read everything that's been written, but I know that the sheriffs knew us, and they knew that we were making no problems with anybody around us. They knew that we weren't having any kind of confrontation with anybody that was a neighbor. That instead of arguing and trying to prove our points to them, we had sent, David had sent the boys over to the Spoons, who was across the street. They had lived in the smaller home, and they had moved into the bigger one. And when they moved over, they found that the house was not as well taken care of as it should have been. So they were trying to replace part of the wood and the different things that were in there. Well, our boys had become friendly with them, some of them, and they were telling them their problems, and they would come over with their little girl and watch movies with us. David sent quite a few of the men over to help them get the carpentry and the different work done. And finally, the men came back and told David that they didn't have the money to buy the lumber that they needed. So he sent them into town, and they bought the lumber that was needed and finished the job of making that home presentable so that they could live in it in comfort. But
Let me ask you another question. A lot of people call in here to River City Talk and also tell us about, they try to use the excuse about the illegal weapons. Did you see any in Mount Carmel? Was there any illegal weapons in Mount Carmel that you've seen? And how many weapons were there in there?
Well, let me explain this.
Okay.
After the people came in from California, many of them had, all of them had positions there. Many of them had very lucrative positions where they came for 2 weeks and finally decided they were going to stay and listen to what David was given, because he was giving us very intense, deep studies of the scripture. And so now we had to find out some way to keep us all going. Henry had come in and was interested, had become friendly with David, and he and Karen were interested in the Bible that David was teaching and would sit and listen. And finally he found out that we needed some income of some kind. So he told David why he was a gun, he sold guns. In fact, he had a shop, a gun shop, and he sold guns at the gun shows. And he said, look, David, there's a gun show every weekend in Texas. He said, you never have to go out of the state. He said, why don't you take and have a couple of the boys learn how to do this, and I will take them and show them how it is done. They can set up their own sections and sell guns themselves. So David decided that they would try that. And when they did, they found out that it would be very easy to do, because they would not have a 9-to-5 job. They would be able to go on the weekends. It would only require 2 or 3 men to go there every weekend. And so he got into the gun business.
So did he have a license to sell guns?
He went under
and had his own booth.
He went under to Henry's license. See, that's how they were going in business together, really. And so he'd have his own booth, and he'd sell his own guns. And so he began to buy guns, not only from Karen and them, but from other organizations. And we would also, while they were there, they found out that different men were rather large and they could not buy anything to hold their mags. So they started to make these vests that went on and they could hold their mags when they went out, because these men would go out to hunt and they'd need to carry them some way. We sold MREs, which was what they would bring with them to eat. We sold anything that they would be interested in.
So
We sold these what do you call them? The things that they usually explode. You throw and they explode.
grenades.
Grenades. We sold grenades as paperweights.
Okay.
We had all these things that would be interesting in a gun show.
So would you say that David Koresh was doing the same thing that hundreds of other Americans are doing in this United States?
Oh yes. Not only that, I had 2 or 3 people come up and say, "Well, look, I have as many or more guns than you had at your house, at your place." Even one of the lawyers told me that.
Okay, that's every time we have a discussion on Waco, the lie that was done at Waco. I call it the Waco lie.
Yeah.
Somebody calls in here and says child abuse, and they say the guns. So that's why I wanted to get that out of the way.
Well, that's the story on those 2 items.
Okay. And another thing I want to ask you about was Peter Gent. He was in the water tower cleaning it, and he was shot, and he laid there for 8 days
Well,
before you could get to him.
Well, the thing is this way. The morning of the 28th, about 6 o'clock in the morning, Paul and his young son was getting ready to go to a gun show. So they went down and had breakfast, and Peter Jentz was there. And he said the reason he was up so early was because he had been scraping the water tower. We had a huge water tower that you could see from the 2491 as you came over the hill. You could look across, and the water tower was higher than the hill you were on. It had not been used for some time, and so he had gone in there to scrape it because it was rusty. And so he was scraping that, and he wanted to get out of it before the sun became too hot, because it was so hot in there he couldn't stand the heat. So he started about 6 o'clock in the morning to to scrape the water tower, and when these helicopters came in, it must have been terrible for him, because the sound must have vibrated in there very badly, and he didn't really know what was going on. Apparently, one of the tapes that someone showed me showed that there was nobody up on the water tower during a certain period of the morning. But a little later, you could see that there was something up there. It could be a body that was up there. He had apparently come up because there was opening up there. He had come up through the opening to see what was going on. And there was snipers all around us. There were snipers in the small house across the way. There was snipers up in our barn, which was quite a distance from our main building. There were snipers that had dug in to the ground and had built up a place, a foxhole for themselves. And so apparently one of the snipers, or a couple of them, had hit him, and he lay on the top of that, and we were not allowed to take him out off that, even though we gave the ATF permission to come in and get their men. They would never give us permission to go out to get the people who had died outside, Mark Schroeder and Jeff.
Okay, about Mark, the one
I'm sorry, I said Jeff. They would never allow us to go and get Peter Jentz from the tower.
Okay, about the Branch Davidian that was in the shop 6 miles away, and it was 3 of them trying to get back inside. Do you know anything about that situation?
Yes. Bob Kendrick lived in our shop there, and the shop that which they finally called the Mag Bag was the place where we took automobiles to have them repaired. We refinished cars up at the barn, but this was the one that was called the Mag Bag that was down on the road, the junction, as you came to Mount Carmel. Mark Schroeder had gone down there to help, and Norman was there because he was not allowed to come to the camp because he had left without telling anybody, and he finally ran out of money and he wanted to come back. And David said, well, you can stay down there, but right now you cannot come up to the main house. When the fighting started, it was on radio, and I don't believe they had a television, but they did have a radio down there. And when they finally heard it, they decided to come up to the house and be with us. Mike Schroeder especially wanted to come up because he was married to Kathy, and he had a little boy there, and he actually started to run, and he got way ahead of the others, and he got up towards our property. And I have heard two versions of how he died. One was that he was shot and he hung over the fence. I know he did end down in the gully, and he was shot in the back. He actually, in the area that I'm talking about, he was up near the barn, and up in that area there were many sharpshooters.
Do you know if he had any kind of weapon with him at the time?
Not that I know of. They didn't, as far as I know, none of them had weapons. I don't know. Bob might have had a gun in case of we had wolves out there and coyotes and things.
But as far as the trial and everything, it was never anything brought up about
I have
him.
never heard that he had any weapons.
So he was shot in cold blood.
And he was shot in the back. And they said that he had ambushed them. Well, how could he ambush them if he's shot in the back? Anyway, he was face down in the gully. And from what I understand, there was ATF agents, at least one or two, that came up, found him there. He might have, from what they said, he could have been alive. They put a couple of bullets, at least two, in his head. And when they shot his head, it blew his face off. And he had no, but they would never allow us to pick him up and bury him or put him out of the weather. Now, Norman, I don't know whether he really was hit or not, but I know that he gave himself up when he saw what was going on. Bob had come around and he was watching what was going on. He could see that he could not make it into the house. So we had a trailer with 4 elderly women in it over near one of the lakes that was about 2 or 3 miles away.
This
It
is
originally,
not the one they tore up, is it?
no.
That's a different
That's
one?
Bob's camper.
But
Not a camper.
the ATF
that's
or
trail.
FBI came in here and destroyed this property after the fact, is what I'm being told?
Yeah, I saw that.
We're gonna put these pictures up.
That shows.
Okay, here's what you guys need to do from here on out.
What?
Take the pictures. Catherine, look at these pictures, pull through these pictures.
And just talk about them?
Just talk, don't hold them up or nothing, keep them in your lap. I'm
'cause
going to have the
she's gonna put
camera
'em
on
up.
you.
Yeah,
And
okay,
you
let me
just
see
look at all these pictures and you can tell what you know about the pictures. Now, what you do is hold it up for a second, just so I know which picture
which
you're
picture I'm talking about.
Okay?
Yeah, okay.
And you can
Let's
tell
see.
you can tell anything you want about any of these.
Because you'll cover it up, won't you?
Yeah,
I think this is,
that's Paul Fato's.
oh, shoot. Bob, as I told you, went over to the trailer. He was over there for about a week, and then he decided to give himself up to the government. He hadn't been living at our place for quite a little while because he'd been taking care of this other building. Actually, when he gave himself up, he was put in jail. But they did release him after the trial, he and Clive. I'm going to hold a picture up, this one. And it's a picture of Bob's trailer. You can see Janet, his wife, is bent over. What you don't see in this particular picture, there are other pictures that shows that she was almost thigh deep in things that had been pulled out of their cupboards, out of all their storage areas, and it had piled up inside. And she went in afterwards and tried to sort things out and take anything out that was worthwhile. There wasn't much left. Some of his brand new clothes and shoes and everything they had been stepped all over and destroyed. I'm also looking at a truck that belonged to Paul, and they actually destroyed that truck to such a degree that you can hardly tell it's a truck.
It was ran over with a tank.
Yes, it was. All the men had motorcycles, very expensive motorcycles, some of them. And what happened was they ran over many of them with their tanks. The children were very upset when they could see that they were running over their
Go-karts?
go-karts. We had 12 or 15 go-karts. The adults as well as the children used them. The children had motorcycles that 3 different sizes of motorcycles for the 3 different sized children. There was about 6 motorcycles that they had. But each child, if David gave his legal son something, he gave it to every child his age, the same thing. He went out when we were at Palestine and the children were much smaller. He bought little red wagons for every one of the boys and the boys. And every boy that was of age to have a wagon was given one. That he went out and bought these big dolls about this size for the girls. Beautiful dolls. And he gave every girl a doll. There was never any partiality shown. Every child there was his child. And I know that they've made a great deal about the things that he said. But the problem is that people did not understand what he was talking about. I'm looking at one of our buses. The bus was all smashed in. This bus was a bus that you could use on a highway. And we all could get into that bus and we'd go swimming down at the lake or we'd go somewhere in it. And it would hold every one of us that wanted to go. And yet you see the bus is all smashed in. There was no reason for that. I understand now that the bus has been fired. Somebody went there and fired the bus and burnt it. Our other bus that we had that was a school bus, a huge school bus that had been used, had been burnt while it was on the property. It was down near the lake. Everything was destroyed. Our dogs, the first thing they did, we had some beautiful animals, and the first thing they did was shoot the dogs. The dogs the mother dog had 4 pups that was almost full grown, but she also had another set of puppies, and we gave those puppies away to anybody who wanted them before the fire.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
Why do you think that, who did this, the FBI or the ATF, Why did they smash all these vehicles up? This seems unnecessary
The
to me.
ATF.
The ATF did this?
Yes.
This seems like a very unnecessary thing they did here.
Vengeful.
Some of these cars that were parked out there didn't even belong.
This particular bus that I'm showing you now belonged to an elderly lady. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It was a Streamline. Those are very expensive buses.
So were the bus is worth what, 50,000?
That's what I say. This was
Well, that's a trailer house.
no. This is
That's a bus?
this was a trailer bus. You know,
Okay,
one of those.
Oh, motorhome.
Yeah, motorhomes that was complete
Okay.
in itself. She had that. That's what we need. We need music. Can you turn it off?
Well, that's another studio.
Oh, turn it off. We don't need it on.
Well, they're playing a band over here. Let me
Oh,
see.
ask them
Let me
if
see if
they-
that's coming through the speaker. Hold.
Every vehicle that was on Mount Carmel was destroyed, partially or completely. Many of the vehicles had bullet holes in them from. Yeah, I'll talk about the mag bag. The building that I talked to you about, where the three men were, the mag bag had been locked up. They locked it up before they left. And what happened, the ATF came along and smashed the doors in, ripped it apart. The man that owned the building came down to open the door for them, and they said no. They ruined the front of the building. There was so much destruction that occurred while they were around that you cannot tell about it all. It was unnecessary. There was no reason to do some of the things that were done. There wasn't. The boat. We had a boat, and we had two boats. One was David's, and one was David Jones. And we used to go down, and they would water ski. Well, both boats had things done to it so that would have to be fixed. Boat trailers, the different trailers we had, everything on the property had been hurt in one way or another. And there were...
Even the kids' bicycles.
When I came out, oh yes, the children's bicycles. Everybody had bicycles. And the children were so perturbed when they saw the destruction that went on of their toys and the things that they used. There was absolutely no reason for it.
Well, the government was trying to say that there was child abuse going on there. I want to get this in. If there was child abuse going there, do you think that it's the federal government's place to do that or the states?
Well, see, there was no... The ATF could not do anything about child abuse. This was not in their... they were restricted by what they could do and what they couldn't do. And this was not in their jurisdiction at all. Something I wanted to say now, I can't remember what it was.
Just go ahead, she'll cut it off.
I'm trying to think about it. What was it I wanted to say? Oh, I also wanted to put in that when I came out of my room to go see David, and then when he asked me to leave, the last time I came out of there, it was the same, because this was after the shooting. Every window in the front side of the house had been shot out. I can't even think of it.
A bullet hole was in the...
No, the Venetian blinds were hanging on one side, and you could see where they had been hit. The glass was all over the floors in the different rooms. When I went everywhere I looked, there was bullet holes as I went down the hallway and the roof all over. When I went downstairs and I went toward the front door, during the trial, the door on the right, I believe it was, at least one of the metal doors, they said, had melted or was burned. Or these were heavy These were heavy metal doors. And when I looked at them, they had holes coming through the doors, and you could tell it was coming, the projectile was coming from outside to inside, because you could see where the door had been ripped apart and was being pushed toward the inside. One of the holes in the door I saw was that large. At least, is that an inch?
Mm-hmm.
About an inch. And I believe that was the door that was disappeared.
Why don't you go ahead and tell it? Why don't you go ahead and tell that story about what they tried to? Did you already say that a while ago?
What?
About when you tried to when they tried to charge you with the conspiracy to murder, and you had a problem with your right eye.
Oh no, I didn't tell that.
Okay, go ahead.
When I was at the grand jury, of course they knew I'd had 4 operations on my eyes, and but see, I had had surgery, and one of my eyes was 20/20. The other is not as good. My right eye is not as good as my left. Now, when you're shooting, you have to be able to use your right eye. And so, of course, they tried to tell me that I couldn't see the helicopters and I couldn't see the firing and all that. But we were in a very long room, and I said, there was a man sitting way down at the other end of the room, and I told them that I could give them his description if they wanted me to, which they didn't ask for. But they could not charge me with firing a weapon because there was no weapon there that could be used in the left eye and not the right. And you cannot use a right-eyed weapon with your left eye. It is impossible because I tried to do it. I put it up to my eye and I could see you just never could do it. But anyway, you ought to
What
take...
about Ruth Riddle? They charged her with murder because she gave somebody a gun? Is that what that was?
Well, she claimed that she had one of the guns was upstairs, and they came asking for a gun. Now, let me explain this, that when the shooting started, there were very few guns around because they had been taken by Paul to the gun show. Well, they were hunting for guns because they didn't have anything to shoot with. And that's when they came up and asked Ruth if there was a gun around. And she said yes, and she went and got it. She wasn't using it, and handed it to them. And because of that, they're giving her 5 years. Another thing, after the shooting, when they started to look for guns, they realized there was none around, so they went and there had been a shipment of them, and they were all in boxes. Now, when you take any guns out of a box, there is no mags, there is no ammunition. So they had to take the guns out of the boxes, get mags, and get ammunition. And they had to go different places. I don't know where, but they had to go different places. We never had guns around where the children could get to them or see them. This was a business. And David had them in a safe place so the children would never find them or never come close to them.
Do you think the media did a job on the Branch Davidians? Do you think they actually lied?
Well, what I saw was, I watched the 10:30 news, and I found that they were spoon-fed by the government. And if somebody asked a question out of order, in other words, one that they did not want to answer, or they would not answer, they would take this person, and a couple of people were brought in another room. They were told that took all their identification away from them, and they were told they could not come back in again. There were a couple that I understand that went to jail. The media realized that they could not say certain things, and they were handed what they wanted them to tell in their newscasts and in the newspapers. And so they were not allowed to give the truth. And apparently there were very few that was going to stand up and try.
What would you say to a lot of people call this station, and particularly my show, River City Talk, and tell me the government was 100% right in doing what they did to the Branch Davidians? What would you tell somebody in your own words?
Well, I tell them this. I tell them that if this could happen to a peaceful group of people who was not in any way injuring anybody, arguing with anybody, we kept strictly by ourselves because what we did was study the scriptures. If this could happen to a group of people like that, well, let me tell you what one lawyer told me. He came up to me and he said, you know, he said, I have more guns than you had at your place. He said, I wonder if they're coming after me. I said, well, you never can tell. If they came after us, and they came after the Weavers, and they have come after many other people that you probably have never heard of, then surely they can pick anyone out and go after them. So if you feel that if this happened and it was a good thing that it happened to us, you better be mighty careful it doesn't happen to you. Well, just remember one thing, the government is the people. And if you don't stand up and make sure that the government is doing things the way it should, the wrong people will take charge, and they will do what they want to do for whatever reason they have. It might not be for the right reason, but they will certainly try to enforce their way of thinking.
I had the pleasure to meet Clive Doyle and his mother, Edna, and we went out to dinner, and they let me ask them any question that I could pose to him. What is your feelings on Clive? Clive's the one that actually jumped out of the building when it was on fire, and he also lost a daughter. And did he lose his wife there?
No, he lost his daughter. One daughter. His other daughter was down in California, in our home down there. There were other people that came out too beside Clive. David Thibodeau came out, and he came out from the same area that Clive came out. When Ruth came out, she came out from the second story, and she jumped from a window because the heat was getting so intense. She could not take it anymore. When she jumped, she broke her ankle. And actually, she was in such a daze from the smoke and from the CS gas that she really was confused. And actually, she said she did not want to come out. Margie came out. Now, Margie came out from the same section that Rita came out, but she had 80-degree burns all over her body. She's back in England now. Misty came out. Misty has lost all her fingers. She was 16 years old. She has lost all her fingers. And her face, the mask was melted to her face. There are many stories that could be told about the people inside, the ones that came out. Not everybody had the same experience, but everybody went through the shooting. Some of them went through a portion of the 51 days. And the ones I have mentioned came out from the fire.
What about the man that owned the Brittany Motel in Waco that let some of the survivors stay there?
Well, Mark saw everything, was actually watching everything that went on at Mount Carmel, and he felt that it had not been handled correctly. So he put or somebody in the building put a sign out and said, I don't know, it said David or Vernon talk. And it was only out there for a few hours and then pulled back in. But as the people came out of Mount Carmel, they had no place to go. And the only person that offered them a place was Mark Domain. And he said that anyone from there could come in and he would not charge them. And I'll tell you one thing, if you have had a fire in your home and you come out with nothing, you appreciate somebody who will give you a place to stay, even if it's for a few days. But he let us stay as long as we wanted to stay. Finally, the government came in and tried to shut him down. The second time they came back, they did shut him down.
Let's talk a little bit about the fire. And you believe that there's no way that the people inside would have committed suicide?
No, I don't believe anyone in there committed suicide. And the reason I don't believe it is because David had been told he had broken his back. He'd been told he'd never walk again, but he did. But in the meantime, God told him he was not to commit suicide. There was to be no suicide for any reason. And he told us that. And I know nobody would commit suicide there after he had told them that God did not want us to do it.
So, this is your opinion only. Who do you think
I know
started the
this.
fire?
I don't just have an opinion. I know it.
Okay, I'm talking about who do you think started the fire then?
Well, they say, well, he said, I don't even remember how it was worded, but talking about him telling them to start the fires. We had two big compressors. This compressors, isn't that you? Mm-hmm. And we would light those up. They were huge. And they had to be filled with a liquid so they would burn. And we had one usually in the place where we had our meetings, which was toward the front of the building, and one in the dining room, because the dining room was a huge room. It held 150 people. And they would put the fluid in, and then they would light it. And this would heat the place. It was mighty cold there, quite a bit, when they were there for the 51 days. And so I am sure they would put the heat on so the children wouldn't get sick from the cold. So I know that no one set a fire.
What about maybe when the tank smashed into the building, you think that could have set that heater on fire?
Well, I don't know whether that heater would be set on fire or not, but I know that we had Coleman lamps that we used, and I know they didn't have electricity. And we had to put fuel in those. Well, I burnt my hair on Coleman lamps, so I know that it's very easy to have problems with them. They are not too sturdy. And the way that they went into that building and tore it apart, they went in everywhere there was a stairway. and pushed it so that the stairway could not be used. They rammed the door, the front door. They pulled the sides down, especially on the right-hand side. You could see where that building was tipping on both. That building was not a fortress. It was made out of wood from 15 houses that had been standing from 1959. So the wood was very dry. David put in a special electrical plug so that if we wanted to use a hairdryer, an iron, or anything that drew a lot of electricity, you had to go to that one spot and use that plug. We were not allowed to use just anything up in our rooms. And he warned us. He said, if this building ever catches fire, it'll just go up because the wood is so dry. So that is one of the reasons why it burns so fast and so hot. There. Oh, I was thinking too, David Thibodeau was downstairs, and his wife lived upstairs with 3 children. And he told how he tried to get up the stairways. There was absolutely no way he could get up the stairways because they had pushed that whole stairway in, as well as all the others. And he never could climb up them to get to where the children and his wife was. Actually, they were downstairs, but he didn't know it because he was at one end of the building and they were at the other. They were in what was our refrigeration unit, which people call the bunker. That had originally been a
Bus?
no, it was
Cold storage?
No, it was where you put your, if you have money, where do you put in a safe? That had been the big safe for the Davidians when they owned the place. And it had withstood one fire. And they actually expected it to withstand a next fire because it was so thick and well insulated. But that is where the women and children went in. They covered themselves with blankets, wet blankets. They covered their children and their heads with wet blankets. And when I talked to Dr. Crow, was it Crow? Dr. Crow, yes.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, when I talked with one of the doctors that had been working with the bodies, he said that with them having that over their head and with the intense heat of the fire, they would have steamed themselves. Also, when they rammed the building, that long projection that was on one of them went in and hit the top of this
Tower?
No, where the women and children were.
Bunker?
Well, they called it a bunker.
The government called it a bunker?
Yeah. When it hit the roof of that, it had made it collapse, and it came down and killed many of them. Gave them concussions. They tried to say we had hammered them, we had hit them over the head to kill them.
That's ridiculous. Do you think that, in your mind, do you think the government should be accused of child abuse since they cut the electricity off and the food spoiled? The music, the lights, they couldn't sleep, it scared the children, and plus battering them with tanks and CS gas. Do you consider that child abuse?
I certainly do. I certainly do. They did not let any of us, David, know that they wanted to come in. They didn't want to come in. If they had wanted to come in, all they would have had to do was walk up to the door and knock on it. David always let anybody in that wanted to come in. There would never have been a gunshot fired, and there would never have been a fire. And they knew that. They could have picked David up any time outside of our camp. He always went to the different, he went to town. And he always went to the music stores. And he had friends in some of the stores. And he'd go there and visit and look for things because he had a band and he was trying to get it started. He was an excellent musician. I've never heard anybody play like him.
Can you tell me how long you lived at the Mount Carmel?
I lived there over 25 years. And I was there when other people were in charge of the place. The message that David had was not something that came out of the blue. It followed the messages that had been given since 1843.
Can you tell me what you feel the real reason the government came after David Koresh?
Well, I know many reasons, but I don't have time right now to tell them all.
Just the basic reasons. You don't think it was guns or child abuse? That's just a cover-up?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You see, it was the same thing that happened to Christ in his day. He was done away with because the Sanhedrin didn't want him around. So, it was a parallel.
Do you think that David did find out the truth behind the 7 seals?
David gave us the 7 seals. He gave us the 7 seals for over 2.5 years. In fact, in 1985, he started the first seal. But the whole Bible was not brought together until later, where he gave us all the prophecies that went along with the 7 seals. And the 7 seals are for this age, this time. Revelation is for us. That's what it was written for. The whole Bible was written for this generation, not for the generations before.
Somebody also called in on the comment line and said that David Koresh had many wives, and he was also supposedly had a 14-year-old girl. Can you tell us the story behind that?
Well,
I didn't know how to answer
do
him.
I have enough?
I was going to call him back and
Do
tell
I
him.
have enough time?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, well, David married Rachel when she was in her teens. I saw the marriage license. I can vouch for that. And she had Cyrus. I'm trying to think of the dates now. I'm terrible on dates. But anyway, it wasn't too long. It was over a year, I think, that later that she had Cyrus. And they were over in Israel for part of the time. They thought Cyrus was going to be born over there in February. But they came back before he was born, and he was born in March. And so he was an American citizen. But he had other wives. But it's like everything else. How many men walking the streets have many wives? If you have sex with a woman or a man, you're married. And you better check your Bible and find out what God says about that. If you do this, or you have a person that you are going with after you are married and you have sex with them, that is your second wife, whether you know it or not. And you are responsible to take care of her as well as your first wife. Even the Mormons know that. That's what they teach. That's what they have taught, rather. You see, there was nothing that David did that was his own.
Did you guys discuss the polls?
Oh, yeah. Pretty extensively.
There was nothing that David did that was on his own. Everything he did, he would wait until God told him what to do. And so when he would say on television or radio, I am waiting on God, that's what he was doing. He was waiting on God. David did nothing of his own. There were many things he did that he did not want to do, but God said to do it, and he would do it.
What do you think about Janet Reno? Do you think she did a good job in this whole thing?
No, I don't. I blamed her completely at first, but then I realized that she was not told everything. But then I realized it's her responsibility to check on what people tell her. She was in a position where she could have checked everything out. She was also told that there had been children that had been hurt from the CS gas, and she still allowed them to use it. Well, I don't want to go into that.
Okay. If you... Here we go again. Look over there. Okay, if you had a chance to talk to your... What, is it time? Okay. Well, when you come in here, I thought you meant
I
to
was going
stop.
to pick up that board and start putting pictures in.
Okay. If you had a chance to tell the people that are still unjustly in prison right now, in federal prison, what would you tell them?
Do you mean the ones who were
The ones
with
that
us?
the government charged for conspiracy to murder a federal agent,
Well,
and they were found innocent.
Well, you see, I wouldn't have to tell them anything, because those people that are in jail heard what David told us, every one of us. He told us that certain things that could happen. He showed us many ways things could end, but he never told us that it would be the way it finally ended. God always has a little extra something that he does. I realize that, and I'm sure everybody else that's been in Mount Carmel realizes that everything happened because God allowed it to happen. That this fire was a signal fire to gather an army. And what the people did not know that came in with guns, what the government, I think, did understand, and what they should have understood, they weren't fighting people, they were fighting God. This was God's people. This was God's army that's being brought together now. It will not go after the government right away. But when David comes back, then you're going to see an army of 2 million people. You're going to see an army spring up from all over the world that will take care of all the evil in the world. All the people who want to run things their way. All the people who would not listen if God tried to speak to them. I don't feel like I have to go out and shoot anybody. And if they shoot me, I could care less. I thank them. They can kill me anytime they want to. But God is in charge. God wants to save every soul in the world. And he's collecting his people, people that others would not realize.
We want to thank you for being here.
I want to thank you for the opportunity of talking and being able to say what I want to say. I really was not prepared. And I'm going to sit down and at least get my thoughts in order. I was sort of rambling around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry I didn't give it the way I should.
We want to thank Jack DeVault for writing this book, The Waco Whitewash, and many of the things the questions that I've asked tonight, and the questions and the comments that I've made came out of this book.
Well, I met
So
Jack.
if any federal agents are out there,
Yeah.
go talk to Jack DeVault. That's where I got my information. And also talking to the Davidians that I've had dinner with, and I've had the pleasure to have dinner with you also, Catherine. And I appreciate you coming on River City Talk, because I know you've been on a lot of major media, and we're just a local media, and we really appreciate it.
Well, you see, everyone should know what happened. Everyone. I don't care where they are. I don't care, who they are. God wants everybody to know the truth.
I sure feel bad for thinking the way I did before.
Well, don't feel bad, because you were looking at things from where you stood. But now that you've got on higher ground, you can understand the truth clearer. And this is what is happening all over. When I was at the Brittany Hotel, I had men come in, and what surprised me, it wasn't women that came in and said it. It was men that came in and said it, and not just one of them. And they said, if I had known what was going on, I would have been there.
A lot of people.
And I realized that a lot of people were in the dark. A lot of people. There was a lot of ATF agents, FBI agents, all different sections of the government who believed innocently, ignorantly. But a lot of them know that some of the truth now, and a lot of them have changed their mind. And that is good. At least there'll be, a person who refuses to listen never can make a good choice. But people who have listened to both sides can make a choice that is worth something. And that's why God allowed some of us to come out, so that we could talk for him and tell what was going on, and tell the people that we weren't out to go after them with guns. We were using the sword of truth.
Do you think the major media has tuned you out?
Well, I haven't really tried. See, when I first came out, I did not try. Mm-hmm. I told my lawyer he said I had offers. I said I don't want them. I don't want to take any of the offers. I don't want to speak to anybody. In fact, I stayed out of the picture. They didn't see me on anything for a long time. Now, in Waco, I had a friend at one of the channels who used to come and ask me questions about different things, and I'd get on his show. But that was not nationwide. It did not cover a large area.
I really feel that Austin is in the dark of what went on. I talked to many, many people here in Austin, and they all feel the government did the right thing, that the Branch Davidians were wrong, David Koresh was wrong, and I hope this show will wake them up.
Well, there are a lot of dark areas in the whole world, whether it's religiously dark or whether it's, civilly dark. Mm-hmm. But like I say, there's only one law now, and that is listen. Listen, and you don't have to agree with me. I'm not asking anybody to agree with me. But I'm saying if I tell you something about the scriptures, Go and look it up for yourself. Prove it one way or the other. You know, you are the one that's going to stand on your own. And you're not going to stand for me, I'm not going to stand for you. But I'd like everybody to be informed.
Little children, all so helpless and so small. 17 little children, how many names can you recall? Maybe we should stop and ask ourselves, have we become so blind? Will 17 little children finally open up your mind? I've heard it said the Branch Davidians only got what they deserved, yet no one seems to know what laws were broken, what was in the warrant they never served. Yesterday I sold my TV set, stopped my subscription to the Times. To me it's plain to see the media was an accomplice to these crimes. 17 little children, don't it make you wonder why? 17 little children, how could they deserve to die? Maybe we should stop and ask ourselves, have we become so blind? Will 17 little children